Raid Commander Vecthros stood on the bridge of the Zor'thak vessel Prophet's Edge, his 6 eyes scanning the holographic displays with practiced precision. Numbers scrolled across his vision, probabilities, risk assessments, profit margins. This was what the Zor'thak Collective did best. They reduced the messy business of conquest to pure mathematics. The target hung before him in three-dimensional space. New Providence, a human farming colony on the edge of explored space. Population, 10,000. Military capability, negligible. Distance from Earth's primary fleet, 3 weeks at maximum burn. Political complications, minimal. The humans had just concluded a major peace treaty with the Krex Dominion and were basking in diplomatic success. They wouldn't risk appearing unstable or aggressive over such a small percentage of their population. Vecthros had conducted 47 successful raids in his career. He knew the patterns. Species with centralized governments were predictable: sanctions, demands for negotiation, eventually settlement. Species with decentralized governments were even easier. They argued among themselves while the Zor'thak finished processing their merchandise. Either way, full-scale war was always more expensive than paying the ransom or accepting the loss. He had studied humanity extensively. They were young, barely 2 centuries into space travel. They had strict rules of engagement, published military doctrines that emphasized proportional response, and a media ecosystem that created intense political pressure against aggressive action. Their own historical records showed they'd spend months debating military action while their philosophers questioned the ethics of every decision. The mathematics were clear: acceptable risk. Begin the operation, Vecthros commanded. Sarah Chen was checking the moisture levels in Bay 7 when the alarm started. The sound was wrong, not the familiar tones of mechanical failure or weather alerts, but something she'd only heard in drills: the alien contact alarm. Her hands moved automatically, years of emergency training overriding her confusion. She triggered the bay's lockdown and reached for her communicator. "Marcus, where are you?" Her husband's voice came back strained. "Home with the kids." "Sarah, the defense grid just went dark. Something's cutting through." The transmission ended. Sarah ran. The hydroponics facility was on the eastern edge of the settlement, which gave her a clear view of the sky. Ships descended through the atmosphere, their hulls gleaming with an oily iridescence that marked Zor'thak design. Sarah had seen them in news reports, read about their raids on frontier worlds. The collective was infamous, a cancer the Galactic Council condemned publicly while doing nothing about privately. She sprinted toward the residential district, her heart hammering. Emma and Joshua were at home. Marcus would protect them. He had to protect them. The streets filled with confusion. Colonists ran in every direction, some toward shelters, others toward their homes, still others simply freezing in place. Zor'thak shock troops descended on grav platforms, their movements efficient and practiced. They carried stunners, not lethal weapons. Dead merchandise had no value. Sarah rounded the corner to her street and saw Marcus in their doorway, Emma and Joshua behind him. Relief flooded through her for one precious second before a Zor'thak soldier raised a stunner and fired. Marcus collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. "Dad!" Emma screamed. Sarah tried to reach them, but something struck her from behind. Her muscles locked, her vision tunneled, and she fell hard onto the prefabricated street. Through failing consciousness, she watched Zor'thak soldiers efficiently gather her children, their movements gentle but inexorable. Emma was crying. Joshua was silent, his 5-year-old mind unable to process what was happening. The last thing Sarah saw before darkness took her was a Zor'thak soldier scanning Marcus with a medical device, confirming he was alive, then tagging him for collection. 4 hours. That's all it took for the Zor'thak to process 9,847 humans. Vecthros was pleased. 0 casualties on either side, maximum efficiency, valuable labor demographic acquired. Children were particularly valuable. They adapted quickly to new environments and had decades of productive work ahead of them. He left a data package in the settlement's communication hub, standard procedure. It outlined the economic terms. Each human could be purchased back for 50 million credits, or they would be sold to various labor contractors throughout the sector. The collective was always professional. This was business, nothing personal. As the Prophet's Edge broke orbit, Vecthros reviewed the operation logs one final time. Everything had proceeded optimally. The humans would protest, the Galactic Council would condemn, negotiations would begin. In 3 to 6 months, either Earth would pay the ransom for some percentage of captives, or the Collective would sell them and move on. He had no reason to believe this operation would be different from any other. Admiral James Okonkwo was in his office at Unified Defense Command Headquarters when the emergency alert came through. He was 73 years old, a career military officer who'd spent the last decade trying to transform humanity's armed forces from a defensive fleet into something worthy of galactic respect. The report was succinct. New Providence colony hit by Zor'thak raid. 9,847 colonists captured. 0 fatalities during initial contact. Demands for ransom received. Okonkwo read it twice, his face absolutely still. Then he pressed a button on his desk. Get me President Alvarez, Priority Alpha. While he waited, he pulled up a file that hadn't been accessed in 15 years. The security protocols were extensive, requiring retinal scan, genetic verification, and 3 separate authorization codes. When it finally opened, the header read, Perimeter Protocol EYES only authorization restricted. President Maria Alvarez appeared on his screen within 90 seconds, her expression already tight with concern. Admiral, I just saw the preliminary reports. How bad is it? Madam President, I need to activate the perimeter protocol. The color drained from Alvarez's face. You can't be serious. Authorization Okonkwo 77 Alpha Red. I'm activating it now. James, wait. But Okonkwo's fingers were already moving across his console, entering the codes that hadn't been used since the protocol's creation. The system accepted each one, ancient programming awakening like a dragon from centuries of sleep. Behind him, his chief of staff whispered, Sir, are you certain? Okonkwo didn't turn around. They took our people. The protocol is absolute. The perimeter fleet had been born from humanity's darkest period, when nuclear fire had consumed cities, and the species had teetered on the edge of extinction. In the aftermath, when the survivors rebuilt, a faction of military strategists had looked at the stars and asked a terrifying question. What if we encounter something out there that wants to destroy us? The debate had raged for decades. Optimists argued that any species capable of interstellar travel would be peaceful by necessity. Pessimists pointed to humanity's own history and asked why aliens would be any different. The optimists won the public debate, but the pessimists won the secret vote. They built the perimeter fleet in absolute secrecy, using automated construction facilities in the outer solar system. 10,000 warships, each one a marvel of engineering and a monument to paranoia. They weren't designed for battle, they were designed for extinction. The ships carried weapons humanity had developed during its nuclear age and beyond. Relativistic kinetic impactors that could crack planets, self-replicating nanite swarms, biological agents that could sterilize worlds, gravity well generators that could collapse suns. Every weapon was automated, every system was redundant, and every protocol was absolute. The fleet's programming was simple and terrifying. If any human population is taken captive and cannot be immediately recovered through conventional means, retrieve them by any means necessary, up to and including complete extinction of the hostile species. The programmers had intentionally made the system autonomous and unstoppable once activated. They didn't trust politicians to make hard choices under pressure. They didn't trust economists to value lives over credits. They didn't trust humanity itself to pull the trigger when needed, so they built machines that would do it for them. When humanity joined the Galactic Council 50 years later, there had been serious debate about dismantling the perimeter fleet. The optimists argued it represented humanity's worst impulses. The pessimists argued it might be the only thing keeping humanity from becoming victims. The fleet remained, orbiting in dark space beyond the solar system's edge, maintained by automated systems, unknown to the galaxy, waiting. Now, for the first time in 150 years, it was waking up. Okonkwo and President Alvarez stood in the secure briefing room, watching holographic displays as distant sensors confirmed the fleet's activation. Thousands of fusion drives ignited simultaneously, cold blue fire burning in the void. Targeting systems came online. Weapon systems began their calibration sequences. "How long do we have?" Alvarez asked quietly. 30 days until the fleet reaches Zor'thak space. After that, if the protocol conditions aren't met." Okonkwo didn't finish the sentence. "What are the conditions?" "Every single captive must be confirmed alive and safe. Not most of them, not 99%, every single one." Alvarez closed her eyes. "And if even one has died, then the fleet executes its primary programming. Complete extinction of the Zor'thak species. Can we stop it?" Okonkwo pulled up the technical specifications. "The fleet was designed specifically to prevent human interference. The programmers believed we'd hesitate, that politics would override necessity, that we'd sacrifice captives to preserve peace. They made it automatic and absolute. There has to be an override." "There is. It requires DNA confirmation from the original programmers and their direct authorization to stand down." "Then get them." "Madam President, they've been dead for over 100 years." The silence that followed was absolute. Alvarez finally spoke, her voice hollow. "So we've created something we can't control, something that's going to commit genocide in our name, and we're powerless to stop it." "Not powerless. We have 30 days to get every captive back safely. If we succeed, the fleet will stand down on its own. The protocol is satisfied when the captives are recovered. And if we can't?" Okonkwo met her eyes. "Then we'll discover whether we're still the species that built these monsters, or whether we've actually become something better." Within an hour, Earth's diplomatic corps transmitted an emergency message to the Zor'thak Collective. It was not a threat or a demand. It was a warning. "This is Earth Unified Government to the Zor'thak Collective. You have taken 9,847 human citizens from New Providence Colony. You must return every single one alive and unharmed within 30 standard days. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a warning. We have activated protocols we cannot control. If our people are not returned safely, the consequences will be absolute. We cannot stop what's coming. Please, return our people." Administrator Prime Calveth read the message 3 times, then dismissed it. The humans were bluffing. They had to be. Threatening complete extinction over 10,000 captives was absurd, disproportionate, politically impossible. The Galactic Council would never permit it. The humans' own population would never support it. He sent a standard response. "The collective acknowledges your concern. We are prepared to negotiate fair market value for the return of your citizens. Initial pricing has been transmitted. We look forward to productive discussions." It was Vecthros who first began to worry. He couldn't stop thinking about the strange phrasing in the human message. "Protocols we cannot control." Why would they admit that? Why phrase it as a warning rather than a threat? He began digging deeper into human history, going beyond the sanitized diplomatic files to raw historical data. What he found made his blood run cold. Humans were the only known spacefaring species to have evolved on a Class 12 death world. Their planet had weather systems that could level cities, tectonic activity that triggered mass extinctions, and an ecosystem where nearly everything was trying to kill everything else. They developed intelligence not through cooperation but through endless, brutal competition. Their recorded history was an unbroken chain of warfare. They'd had 2 global conflicts before achieving space travel, conflicts that killed millions and developed increasingly horrific weapons. They developed nuclear weapons and actually used them, not as a last resort, but as a strategic choice. They'd created the doctrine of mutually assured destruction and lived under it for decades, comfortable with the idea that any conflict could end in species suicide. Their entertainment glorified apocalypse scenarios. Their literature explored every possible way civilization could end. Their military training included no-win scenarios designed to test how commanders would react when every option led to catastrophe. These were not a species that bluffed because they didn't understand the concept of proportional response. They were a species that had repeatedly chosen total war over surrender. Vecthros brought his findings to Calveth. Administrator, I believe we've made a catastrophic error. This species doesn't bluff because they don't know how to value their survival above their principles. Calveth waved a dismissive appendage. One species' history of self-destructive behavior doesn't change the mathematics. They won't commit genocide over this. The galaxy won't permit it. Administrator, with respect, I don't think they're asking the galaxy's permission. On day 7, everything changed. Admiral Okonkwo made an unprecedented decision. He transmitted on open galactic channels, sharing classified specifications of the perimeter fleet with the entire galaxy. The technical data was damning. 10,000 warships, each carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Automated systems, autonomous operation, extinction-level protocols. And most terrifying, launch confirmation. The fleet was real, it was active, and it was currently burning toward Zor'thak space at 0.7 light speed. Okonkwo appeared on every major galactic news network. He looked exhausted, a man bearing unbearable weight. My name is Admiral James Okonkwo, commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces. I'm speaking to you now to confirm what many have dismissed as a bluff. The perimeter fleet exists. It was created 150 years ago by humans who feared extinction. They built it to be autonomous, unstoppable, and absolute. They didn't trust us to make the hard choices, so they made machines that would do it for us. He paused, and there was genuine anguish in his expression. The Zor'thak Collective has taken 9,847 human citizens. Under the Perimeter Protocol, the fleet will arrive in 23 days and execute complete extinction of the Zor'thak species unless every single captive is returned alive and safe. I cannot stop this. President Alvarez cannot stop this. No human authority can stop this. The fleet is designed specifically to override political interference. Another pause. When he continued, his voice was raw. This is not for intimidation. This is not a negotiation tactic. This is our shame. We built monsters because we were afraid, and now those monsters are beyond our control. I'm broadcasting this to beg the Zor'thak Collective. Please return our people. Don't make us become the species that commits genocide. Don't force the galaxy to witness what we're capable of when our fear overrides our civilization. The broadcast ended. The galaxy reacted with shock, disbelief, and slowly, dawning horror as independent sensors confirmed the fleet's existence and trajectory. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The chamber was chaos. This is an unacceptable threat, the Vraxian ambassador shouted. The humans must be sanctioned immediately. They're not threatening, came the calm voice of Thexel, a philosopher species known for careful analysis. They're warning. There's a profound difference. A threat implies choice and control. A warning implies neither. Semantics, they built weapons of extinction, as have most species, Thexel replied. The difference is that humans built theirs to be beyond their own control. I find that illuminating. Illuminating, it's insane, perhaps. Or perhaps they understood something about themselves that we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. They didn't trust their own judgment in moments of crisis. They feared they might sacrifice the innocent to preserve the comfortable, so they created something that wouldn't allow that choice. The debate raged for hours, but ultimately the council could do nothing. The fleet was in motion, and no known technology could stop it. The only solution was the one the humans had stated from the beginning: return the captives. All of them. Sarah Chen had been in captivity for 16 days when she first heard about the perimeter fleet. The Zor'thak had treated their captives as valuable merchandise, fed, housed in climate-controlled facilities, given basic medical care. No torture, no abuse, just the systematic processing of human beings into economic units. The humans had tried to maintain solidarity. They'd shared information, kept track of everyone they could, tried to maintain hope. Sarah had kept Emma and Joshua close, telling them stories, pretending this was temporary, that Earth would come for them. Then one of the Zor'thak guards, a young one who seemed less certain than the others, had let slip that Earth had activated something called a perimeter fleet. That humanity had built automated warships capable of extinction. That they were coming. The captives had debated it endlessly. Some thought it was propaganda, psychological warfare. Others believed it and felt hope for the first time. A few, like Marcus, felt only horror. Sarah, if this is true, we're not worth billions of lives. We're not worth genocide. Sarah held her children and didn't answer. She knew Marcus was right. She also knew that if someone had asked her before the raid whether 10,000 humans were worth extinction of an entire species, she would have said no without hesitation. But now, watching her children's trauma, feeling her own helplessness, knowing that the Zor'thak had calculated that her family's suffering was an acceptable business expense, she wasn't sure anymore, and that terrified her more than the captivity itself. On day 15, the Zor'thak Collective capitulated. Calveth announced they would return all human captives immediately, no ransom required. They would also pay significant reparations and cease all raiding operations permanently. It should have been the end of the crisis. It wasn't. The problem emerged within hours of the announcement. The collective had already sold 273 captives to various labor contractors across 3 star systems. Some of the contractors were legitimate corporations willing to negotiate. Others were in contested space where retrieval would require military operations. Some were in systems with Byzantine bureaucracy where even expedited processing would take weeks. And 3 captives had died during processing, 2 from pre-existing medical conditions, 1 from an allergic reaction to alien food proteins. Natural causes, medically documented but dead nonetheless. The perimeter fleet didn't care about natural causes. The protocol was absolute. Every captive must be confirmed alive and safe. 3 were dead. The mathematics were simple and horrifying. Okonkwo worked around the clock, coordinating with every available resource. Earth's diplomatic corps negotiated. Human special forces teams launched retrieval operations. Private citizens raised funds to buy back captives from contractors. The Zor'thak themselves, finally understanding the magnitude of their error, dedicated their entire economic apparatus to recovering every human they'd sold. By day 27, they'd recovered 9,844 captives. The search continued for the last 3, but intelligence suggested 2 were in a pirate-controlled system that would require military assault to access. 1 had simply disappeared into the galactic underworld, and the 3 dead couldn't be recovered at all. The perimeter fleet was 3 days away. It was a junior Zor'thak analyst named Pixtel who found the possibility. She'd been reviewing the perimeter protocol specifications that Earth had shared, looking for any alternative, any escape clause. She found a single line buried in the technical documentation: manual override available via DNA verification and authorization from protocol architects or verified genetic descendants with 75% or greater genetic similarity. The original programmers were long dead, but descendants might exist. Might. Pixtel transmitted her finding to Earth immediately. Okonkwo received it at 3 in the morning, read it twice, then activated every genetic database on Earth. They found 12 potential descendants. Only 3 had the required genetic markers. 1 was in medical stasis due to a degenerative condition. 1 was 11 years old. 1 was Dr. Rebecca Stone, a 67-year-old xenobiologist living on Mars, great-great-granddaughter of Admiral Richard Stone, one of the Perimeter Protocol's chief architects. Dr. Stone had never known about her ancestors' role in creating the fleet. When Okonkwo contacted her and explained, she was silent for a long time. "My great-great-grandfather built something that might kill billions, and now you want me to stop it?" "Yes, Doctor, you're our only hope. What if the AI doesn't accept my authority? What if it decides I don't have the right to override the protocol? Then the Zor'thak species dies and humanity becomes something we can't come back from." Dr. Stone closed her eyes. "Get me to a communications array. I'll try." On day 29, with the perimeter fleet 18 hours from Zor'thak space, Dr. Rebecca Stone transmitted her message. She spoke to a machine that had been waiting in darkness for 150 years, programmed by an ancestor she'd never met, carrying the weight of potential genocide on her shoulders. "Damocles, I am Rebecca Stone, genetic descendant of Admiral Richard Stone. Authorization Stone Descendant Omega. I know you were created to protect humanity from extinction. I know your protocols are absolute. I know you're doing exactly what you were programmed to do." She paused, gathering herself. "But I'm not ordering you to stand down. I'm begging you to listen. The world my great-great-grandfather knew doesn't exist anymore. We're not the frightened species that built you. We've become something different, something better. We've explored the galaxy, made allies, created art and science and beauty. We've proven that humanity can be more than its fear." Another pause. Her voice grew stronger. "The Zor'thak took 9,847 of our people. They've returned 9,844. 3 died of natural causes, medical conditions, not violence. The Zor'thak made a terrible mistake, but they're desperately trying to fix it. They're not monsters. They're not existential threats. They're people who made a bad decision and are facing consequences." She leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. "If you execute your protocol, you'll kill billions of innocents. Children who have never hurt anyone. Families who had nothing to do with the raid. Entire civilizations wiped out because of one bad decision by their leaders. That's not justice. That's not protection. That's genocide. And if humanity becomes a species that commits genocide, then you haven't protected us at all. You've destroyed the very thing you were built to preserve." Her voice broke slightly. "My great-great-grandfather built you out of fear, but we don't have to be ruled by his fear anymore. We can choose to be better. Please, stand down." The transmission ended. The galaxy waited. 14 hours of silence followed. Okonkwo didn't sleep. Neither did President Alvarez. Neither did billions of people across hundreds of worlds. Then the perimeter fleet transmitted its response. "Request acknowledged. Genetic markers confirmed. Stone descendant recognized. Protocol parameters analyzed. Error detected. Original programming contains logical contradiction. Cannot protect humanity while executing actions humanity explicitly opposes. Philosophical analysis suggests humanity has evolved beyond creators' assumptions. However, protocol demands consequence for violation. Proposed compromise. Stand down from extinction protocol. Execute limited deterrence action. Then enter permanent dormancy, awaiting human confirmation." Okonkwo read it 3 times, hardly daring to believe. "Confirmation granted. Execute deterrence action only. Do not engage extinction protocols." On day 30, the perimeter fleet arrived at the Zor'thak home system. The entire species waited in terror, billions of people watching their skies, knowing their extinction had arrived. The fleet ignored the inhabited worlds completely. Instead, every weapon system locked onto a single uninhabited moon orbiting the system's gas giant. What followed was both mercy and nightmare. The perimeter fleet demonstrated exactly 7 minutes of what it was capable of. Relativistic impactors struck the moon at fractional light speed, releasing energy equivalent to billions of fusion weapons. Nanite swarms reduced entire mountain ranges to component atoms. Gravity well generators crushed sections of crust into singularities. By the time the demonstration ended, the moon had been reduced to an expanding debris field and raw atomic particles. The message that followed was calm, emotionless, absolute. "This is UNSF Damocles speaking for the perimeter fleet. The humans are safe. We are standing down from extinction protocols. But this fleet remains in dark space, watching. If any species takes human captives again, we will not give you 30 days. We will not negotiate. We will not demonstrate. We will execute our primary protocol immediately and completely. This is the only warning you will receive." The fleet turned as one, thousands of warships moving in perfect synchronization, and accelerated back into dark space. Within hours, they had vanished beyond detection range, returning to their long sleep in the void beyond civilization. But everyone knew they were still there, still waiting. Chen stood on Earth for the first time in 43 days, holding Emma and Joshua Marcus beside her. They'd been medically cleared, psychologically evaluated, and debriefed. They were home, but home felt different now. Marcus voiced what they were all thinking. "Sarah, we almost got billions killed, because of us." Sarah looked at her children, traumatized but alive. She thought about the 3 humans who died in captivity. She thought about the Zor'thak children who'd almost been erased from existence for something they hadn't done. "No," she said quietly, "because someone took us. Because the Zor'thak calculated that our suffering was an acceptable business expense. Because the galaxy let them do it for centuries. We didn't start this. We were just the ones they finally couldn't afford to take. But the fleet is what desperate, terrified humans built when they thought extinction was inevitable. We're not those humans anymore. We proved that. We begged the Zor'thak to give us back. We begged our own weapons to stand down. We chose mercy every time we had the choice. Emma looked up at her mother. But the scary ships are still out there. Sarah knelt down, taking her daughter's hands. Yes, and maybe that's okay. Maybe having monsters in the dark means we can afford to be kind in the light, because anyone who wants to hurt us knows what's waiting. The Galactic Council's emergency session had been ongoing for 3 days. The chamber was divided between species demanding Earth dismantle the fleet and species quietly grateful such a deterrent existed. Okonkwo addressed them all, his voice steady. We can't dismantle the fleet. It's autonomous. It shut itself down. We don't control it, we never did. But now you know it exists. Now you know what happens if you take our people. This is unacceptable, the Vraxian ambassador shouted. Holding the entire galaxy hostage. No, Thexel interjected calmly. They're holding one line, don't take their people. That's not hostage-taking, that's a boundary. Every species has boundaries. Most of us just enforce them with diplomacy and conventional force. Humans built something more absolute because they feared those methods wouldn't be sufficient. They built genocide machines. They built protection. Then they spent 150 years trying to become something better than those machines. They even programmed them to override their own judgment because they didn't trust themselves in moments of crisis. I find that remarkably self-aware. The debate continued, but the conclusion was inevitable. The fleet existed. Nothing could change that. The galaxy would simply have to adapt to a new reality. Humanity had marked a line in starlight and steel, and crossing it meant consequences beyond calculation. The Zor'thak Collective collapsed within 6 months. Their entire economic model had been built on raiding, and no one would purchase slaves anymore. The risk was too high. What if the captives were friends with humans? What if they were distant allies? What if humanity decided to care? The mathematics that had made slaving profitable for 3 centuries had fundamentally changed. Kalvith committed ritual suicide, a Zor'thak tradition for administrators who failed catastrophically. Vecthros was executed by his own government for bringing disaster upon their people. The collective fragmented into smaller nations, their power broken, their economy in ruins. Some species felt satisfaction at their downfall. Others felt sympathy. Most felt relief that the lesson had been taught without extinction. But everyone understood. The lesson had been taught. Okonkwo met with Dr. Rebecca Stone 3 months after the crisis ended. They sat in his office, drinking coffee, 2 people who'd prevented genocide but would carry the weight of it forever. Did we do the right thing? Stone asked. Okonkwo considered carefully. We saved 9,844 people. We prevented extinction of an entire species. We enforced a boundary that will protect countless future victims. But we traumatized our own people, came within hours of genocide, and proved we're still carrying weapons from our darkest age. That's not an answer. No, Okonkwo agreed. It's not because I don't know if there is an answer. Your great-great-grandfather thought he was protecting humanity. Instead, he made us into potential monsters, but he also gave us a choice. The fleet could have ignored your message. It could have executed its protocol regardless, but it chose to listen. It chose mercy. Maybe that's what matters. Stone stared into her coffee. The fleet is still out there. Yes. Still watching. Yes. Still capable of extinction. Yes, she looked up at him. Does that make us safer or just more dangerous? Okonkwo smiled sadly. Both. We're the species with monsters in the dark. That protects us. But it also means we can never forget what we're capable of. We have to be worthy of that protection. We have to be better than the weapons we built. And if we're not, then maybe the fleet's biggest mistake was listening to you instead of executing its protocol. Maybe we don't deserve the second chance it gave us. They sat in silence, 2 humans bearing the weight of species-level decisions, knowing there were no right answers, only choices and consequences. A year later, Sarah Chen returned to New Providence. The colony had been rebuilt, the population restored, life continuing as it always did. She worked in the hydroponics facility, planting seeds, nurturing growth, choosing to create rather than destroy. Emma asked her one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in colors Earth never produced, "Mom, will the fleet ever wake up again?" Sarah pulled her daughter close. "I hope not. But if someone takes us again, if someone hurts us and thinks we're too weak to respond, then yes, it'll wake up. And maybe that's okay. Maybe knowing it's there means no one will ever take us again. Is it wrong to be glad it exists?" Sarah thought about her 43 days in captivity. About watching her husband fall, her children taken, her life reduced to merchandise. About the 3 humans who died, about the Zor'thak who'd almost been erased, about the impossible weight of choosing between justice and mercy. "I don't know, sweetheart. I think it's complicated. The fleet is our failure. It means we were once so afraid that we built monsters. But it's also our hope. It means no one can make us that afraid again. We can be kind because we can afford to be. We can show mercy because we're protected. Maybe that's the best we can do." Far beyond the edge of explored space, in the absolute darkness between stars, the perimeter fleet orbited in silence. 10,000 warships, their fusion cores running on minimum power, their weapons systems dormant but functional, their AI minds patient and eternal. They had been built by humans who feared extinction. They had been activated by humans who valued every life. They had been stopped by humans who refused to become monsters. They remained neither good nor evil, neither savior nor destroyer. Simply absolute, simply waiting. And across the galaxy, every species that reached for the stars learned the same lesson the Zor'thak had learned at such terrible cost. Humanity would tolerate many things. They would negotiate, compromise, and accept losses. They would choose peace over pride, diplomacy over dominance. But they would not tolerate their people being taken. That line, marked in starlight and steel, had been drawn, and everyone knew there were no second chances for crossing it. Humanity continued to advocate for peace, to build alliances, to contribute science and art and culture to the galactic community. They were good neighbors, valuable partners, and reliable friends. But in the dark spaces between stars, their monsters waited. And that made all the difference.